G'day humans, Chris Stead here. Today I'm doing a review of the Dyson Wash G1. Now, there's certainly been a lot of interest in the Dyson Wash G1, which is a mop, or as they're calling it, a wet cleaner. Also kind of falls into that wet-dry vacuum category to a certain extent. And it's hoping to get rid of not just the grime and the stains, but also get rid of the hassle as well. Now, if you're a regular to my channel, you'll know that I've already done quite a bit of content around this from early preview screenings and events that I went to with Dyson. And in some of those, I really dive deep into the mechanics behind it, how the design works, how it actually does what it does. So I'm not gonna go too much into that in this review. And I encourage you to go check out those videos if you really wanna dive into what their design decisions were and how they constructed this thing. And I'll put a link in the description that you can just hit to go see that. But let's just focus on this product and a review right now. And look, does it deliver on what it said it's gonna do? Start with the price. So here in Australia, the Dyson Wash G1 will set you back $999. Now that's pretty much on the money with its biggest competitors in the space. So you've got the Eufy Mac V1, you've got the Roborock Flexi Pro, you've got the Tinaco Floor 1 S7 Pro. They all retail for $999. You go a little bit higher, you'll find a Samsung. You go a bit lower, you'll find the Dream. But yeah, so it's more or less where it needs to be competitive against the other players in the market that you might be considering. What are you getting for that? Let's have a look at the specs. So as I said, it's a wet-dry vacuum to the extent that it will pick up wet and dry debris without the use of suction. I'll go into that a little bit more. It's got a detangler inside, so it's going to pull the hair out of the brushes. It's going to pull that out and put it into its little tray. In fact, it's got two motorized counter-rotating microfiber rollers with a density of 64,800 filaments per centimeter squared. So real micro in those fibers. And the fact that they're motorized also plays into the way that it moves across the ground, but I'll go into that more when we talk about the performance. Now it's got full width hydration of the rollers, and I think it's got 26 points of hydration. So basically it's going to wet the entire mop evenly as you go, not just bits of it. It calls itself edge mopping. It's pretty close, but as we'll go into, it doesn't quite get to the edge, but yes, it does have, pretty much as close to edge mopping as you can get, really. It's only clean water that's used on the actual mop. So the way that the system works, basically it's running clean water through the mop and the dirty water never gets back onto the mop. So that's gonna help with the hygiene and keeping things super clean. Now there's a 1 litre water capacity in the clean tank and an 800 ml capacity in the smaller tank, which is bizarre in my mind when you read it on paper, but it suggests to me that 200 mils of the water basically remains on the floor. So that's something we'll go into as well. But to be honest, I don't think it stays wet for too long, so it's not as dramatic as it sounds. And it's got a flexible handle, so that's going to let you to get low. So basically it pivots quite well. It's got a good turning circle, and you can lower the handle right down to get underneath chairs and coffee tables and things like that you might come across in your house. There's 4 different hydration settings as opposed to speed settings. So basically when you go up the speeds between 1, 2, 3 and max, what you're really doing is just increasing the volume of water that's going to go over those mopping brushes, those microfiber brushes. Now, the battery can last up to 35 minutes. That obviously depends on which of those hydration settings you're using. And at the best case scenario, you're going to get 290 square meters of mopping done off a single charge. And that's probably not going back and forth over anything. It will self-clean in the dock. Once it's mounted in the dock, it'll go through a self-cleaning process. It takes about 140 seconds, I think, to go through. A bit loud, but goes quick. You can use low foam detergent in here, but it does not heat the water. Now, Dyson doesn't believe it needs to. It's saying that the agitation, that the heat is only there to break down any grime or stain so that it can then be cleaned off, and they're saying that agitation is enough that you don't need the hot water. I know a lot of people don't feel comfortable with that. So that's something to note. Weight-wise, 4.9 kilos. We'll get into that in a little bit. That's empty, by the way, so 5.9 kilos once you put a litre of water in there. It comes with a 2-year warranty. Interestingly, it's got a 45-day trial period if you buy it through the Dyson website. So you can just give this a go and send it back if you don't like. It's definitely something that I would encourage you to do if the price is right on the Dyson website. Now, as I mentioned, no, it does not use heat. It does not heat the water. And also note, it does not use suction, so there's not a vacuum as such, and there's no air suction here. And this is to reduce the dispersion of odors after you're doing your mopping. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the design, because it's quite, I guess, iconic, the look that they've gone for here. Now, I'm pretty satisfied with the design for the most part. I think it's really smartly thought out, and it's really easy. Honestly, within 5 minutes of unpacking this one and putting it together, you pretty much know what it can do, how to do it, and you're off and running. It's really quite straightforward. Everything's got really simple, smart button presses, so you can just push this and it'll come that out like that. Just come straight back in. You got little color-coded tabs on everything, and that's just as close, just out she comes. Unscrew the lid, empty the water, all clips back in really easily and simply. It's really quite good in that regard. And even here, you can just take the battery out, so you can charge the battery without putting anything into the... You can take the battery out, put that into the charger without having to take the whole device. That's useful. I'll talk about that a bit more in a second, about moving up and down between floors. You've also got a tray over here, which comes out pretty easy. Now, I've left this dirty, so it's going to be interesting. Do you want to have a look? Come over here. And you'll see, once I pull this out, give myself a bit more space. So there you go. So that's your solids tray. And I've deliberately left that dirty, so that you can see what it looks like when it's got a bit of activity in it. That just comes on and off like that. It's quite easy to get in and out. And as you can see, it didn't really drip anything either. And you can just push the button here as well. I won't do that right now because that's a bit more complicated, to take out all the brushes for cleaning if you want, when and how you want to. Little tiny little screen up here at the front, which you probably can't see. That gives you a bit of indication of where everything is, what's happening, what's going on in terms of your speed and battery life. They're the two main indicators up there. It's not a big app thing. It's not about going through the apps and looking through all your settings and monitoring like that. It's kind of all more of an on-device experience. Now, down here you'll see I've got the dock. Now, the dock itself is actually less cool. It's quite flimsy, as you can see that. Very, very kind of cheap, nasty plastic, not very solid. And I wanted to show this as well because I haven't used this for a day, even a bit longer maybe, and you can see there's still a little bit of moisture in here. So that's just from the wet brushes sitting in there. It does a self-clean as soon as you plug it in. So that's not ideal, but I'm not really sure how you can get around it. But I've had people telling me in the comments to some of my other videos that they've got water leaking off this tray. I have not had that. And I also wanted to show this, see how it's plugged in. There's no natural place for the cable to go. It hasn't got there's all this extra cable. I think this is a pretty familiar position that probably people would use. It's in the kitchen. You just want to sit next to your power point. There's a fair bit of extra cable. I like the fact that there's a long cable, but because there's nowhere to wind it and put it away neatly, I tend to just find I keep getting this situation where it just gets in my way a lot, and that's really frustrating. So I do think they could do something better with their cable management. But otherwise, the act of kind of just getting it in and out, it's a little bit cumbersome because you've got to go in from the side, but that's literally it. And if I just use the device, if I just come up here now saying, do you want me to self-clean? Got 100% battery, do you want me to self-clean? I do not want to do self-clean right now. That's all, it's all pretty good. Now, as I mentioned before, it's 4.9 kilograms. So it's got a bit of weight in it. When you're actually moving it, it's not a problem because once those rollers are spinning, it just glides back and forth. There's no issues or dramas there. But if you have a multi-story house, you want to move this up and down, that's where it might become a bit cumbersome. And also, when you want to get into these brushes and clean these brushes out, you kind of got to lift it up onto a bench or something, or turn it sideways, and that's where the weight can play into a little bit. So it is a little bit unwieldy in that regard, compared to say a standard mop with a bucket. And finally, the colors. So I actually quite like the blue and red. It's cool, it's funky, it's different, but it blends in with, I'd suspect, no house ever. So if you're looking for a subtle piece of home appliance machine that's just going to blend in with your whites or your floor, or your other black appliances, or your silver appliances, things like that, it's not going to do that. So I do hope they bring out some different color variants in the future, so that people have the choice to be able to get something that's more in tune with their kitchen than what you can get at the moment. Okay, so we're going to do a live experiment here. I'm going to take the Dyson Wash G1, I'm going to run it over this little obstacle course you can see down here. So I've got a bit of plastic, I've got a sprinkling of dirt, some sultanas, that's honey, so nice and sticky, and an egg and some eggshell. And what you may not be able to pick up on that camera is that there's also covered in pet hair, because my dog sheds right there every morning. Now, the microphone is on me, so you'll be able to hear what it's like to use the device for the volume side of things. So let's have a listen to that. So actually, that kind of clicking sound is really disconcerting. I wish that was a little less violent. All right, so let's turn it on, and I'll put it down to 1. So this is 1 sound. It's not too bad. So, sorry, it's 1 sound. Setting 2. Setting 3. And then max. It's not too bad. So we're going to run this on 1, see how she goes. Okay, so I picked up the sultanas, no worries at all. Let's have a look at the honey. And it's rolling back and forth with ease. Like, you could do it almost with your little finger. So no problems with the honey. There's a little bit of honey still on there. Let me just bump up the speed. And have a look at the egg. And the shells. So, pretty challenging run of options there. And it's done a pretty good job. The shell was a bit of a risk at the end there. You can see how much water it's left on there as well, but I've really gone over it a lot of times. Okay, I should actually point out as well that when it's going, as soon as you put it up, it stops itself. Okay, now in here on the floor, because I know a lot of people always asking me about how these things go in the grout. So I've got some orange juice, so it's got colour, and I've got a bit of coffee that I've put into the grout. So we'll see how it goes there. I'll put it back down to 1 mode, and we'll see how 1 goes, and I'll bump it up if I need to. Oh, there's a bump there. I can't really see much still in the grout. I'll bump it up now. So I was on 1 setting. Have a look in there. There's a little bit of coffee in the grout there, but all the orange is gone from inside the grout. It's probably about a 2 mil drop in the grout. Let's bump up the speed. I'll just run over it one last time. Right, now if you come over here and have a look at the water, so the eggs turned an interesting colour. You can see the difference there between the clean water and what is picking up off the floor. So that's pretty full on. Actually, look at that, it's dropped a bit. All right. Look at that, it's just dropped that there, look at that. It might have been a little too much for the tray, let's have a look. So, might be the problem, I might have overflowed the tray. Yep. So I probably should have noted that I didn't actually empty this before I just did that experiment, which probably wouldn't have helped. So, I'll show you how easy that is to clean in the sink. So it's not the most pleasant of experiences, but so there you go. So I'd already showed you that it was actually already kind of about a third full before I even begun that experiment. And that experiment was obviously quite focused on solids. So we'll just double check that the reason why that didn't pick up is because I had not emptied the thing properly. You can see how easy that is just to pop back in. There you go. Now let's talk about the most important part, performance. How does this thing go? And let's just ignore the fact that it doesn't do hot water, ignore the fact that it doesn't have air suction in here, because Dyson believes you don't need it. And I know there's a lot of hard feelings about this on the internet based on what people have been saying to me. So I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about how my experience with it has been. And my experience with it has been really impressive. You know, the way that they've decided it works. So no matter what I've been picking up, whether it's been liquids, whether it's been like dog food, pellets, cereal, spilled some coffee, I even did ants. So ants decided to march into the dog bowl one day, and I just straight over all the ants, picked up all the ants, and also no ants came back. So it obviously cleaned the ant trail as well, really well, which was great. I've got a dog, which you probably heard barking before. It sheds like you wouldn't believe, and it's picked up all the hair really well. I've been really impressed by that. So it's done, you know, on all the kind of tests that I've thrown at it, it's done the job. And even though it's not a vacuum, I've been using it like a vacuum. So it's not just about like, oh, I've got a stain on the floor, I've spilled something wet, I'm gonna go get this Dyson and use it. I've just been going, well, I just want to go pick out this pet hair, I don't want to sweep it, and this thing just does it. So it's actually, even though it's not a vacuum, I've been using it like a vacuum and just pulling it off because it's just so easy to use. And obviously, so much easier and less hassle than a bucket and a mop scenario. So in that regard, it's doing well. I haven't had any problems with the battery doing my house, which to be fair isn't huge. Probably 100 meters squared of hard wood or tiles or concrete, because I've got polished concrete in the garage, so I've used it in the garage as well on the polished concrete, and it's worked fine on that. And I found it quite easy to get underneath the furniture in my house. It hasn't been a problem, and I'm a tall dude, so even at my height, the stick's fine, the height's fine, and like I said, it glides really easily, and it's actually kind of, fun might be going too far, but I've used it a few times just to do a spot clean, and then just gone off and done the whole thing, right? Because it's just, you can see it working, you can see it doing its stuff. So, and I also like how you can see like it get dirty. And you can see that it's doing something. You can see everything you're pulling off the floor and it's going in there. And so that side of things has been really good. The cleaning side of it has been interesting. So if those were all the positives, if I was going to talk about, I guess, the negatives, well, one, it is that edge. So you can see the brush right there. So it gets pretty close to the edge, but you've still got like a finger's width there. Before you get to the actual true edge. So you will find that when you're moving this across next to walls or stairs or something like that, you are going to get a little bit of side gunk, basically, that you're going to have to deal with another way, either manually or with another device. Then, on top of that, I was expecting it to be a bit quieter, considering that, you know, it doesn't have a vacuum suction in it, so I was expecting it to be a quieter experience. And then when you've got to actually clean the trays out, when you've got to actually got it in and pull it apart, I mean, it's pretty yucky. It's a hands-on experience. It's not like a robot vacuum cleaner where everything's kind of cleaned for you somewhere else. Here, you do have to pull it out. It's quite easy to pull that tray out and just rinse it under a sink, and it just goes boom, and it's clean again, and you put it back in. It's actually quite quick and easy, but when it's filled with pet hair and cereal and all that kind of stuff's all through there, it's a bit full on. And when you take out the brushes and the rollers and you have a look under there, the pet hair does kind of hang around in there a little bit, but it does do the self-cleaning. So that's the trick, is just to make sure you do the self-cleaning before you start pulling it apart, so it gets a bit of a flush through before you start fiddling in there. So that's probably the only kind of negative I can really bring up. The only couple of negatives I can bring out about the performance of actually using the Dyson Wash G1. Overall, I'm really impressed by the Dyson Wash G1. It's taking a different approach to the wet-dry vacuum space, but it works, and it's delivering something that's super functional and very cool. And like I said, I've taken to using it for more than just cleaning up spills as a result of how well it works. Look, potentially they could have nudged it down a little bit on price, because it's not offering, it's not heating the water, there's no steam functionality, it can't be doubled as a vacuum. So with those kind of aspects in mind, there's no kind of deep app support or anything like that. Potentially they could have just nudged it down, maybe $100, maybe they could have retailed for $8.99, just separated themselves from some of the other products in the market which do offer some of those things. Not all of them offer everything, and not all of them offer what I just said, but yeah, maybe they could have just done a little bit there as well. And I did mention before as well that it does, yes, it doesn't dry when you mop, but it doesn't really leave it that wet. So what I found is that, yes, it's wet, you can see you've mopped, but it dries quite quickly. So it's not saturating your floor either. So that's an important thing to note. And I think if you keep in mind some of the criticisms that I've had in this review, and go, okay, well, that's not going to really affect me, that's not what I'm after, that's not my use case, or that's not going to be something that impacts me personally, then I think go for it, because I've really enjoyed using it, and it is a really good machine, and well made, smartly made, and yeah, not too bad for their first real effort in this space by Dyson. Okay, those are my thoughts on the Dyson Wash G1. Thank you very much for watching. Make sure to check out my other videos. And like I said, I'll put a link to the deep dive into how this thing works in the description below, so make sure you check that out. Until next time, I'll check you later. You.